On July the 7th, 1928, the world changed and would never be the same. It was on that day that a small bakery on Elm Street, Missouri, sold the first loaf of machine sliced bread. And it became a nationwide sensation, so much so that a few years later, when sliced bread was banned in the United States, it almost led to a rebellion. On January 18th of 1943, FDR's Secretary of Agriculture, Claude Wickard, proclaimed a ban on bakeries slicing their bread for two reasons. First, he said it led to Americans consuming too much wheat, wasting grain needed to feed the army. And second, he said maintaining old machines and assembling new ones depleted the supply of metal needed for building tanks, ships, and ammunition. But within a single week, newspapers all across the country published exasperated and desperate letters to the editor begging the president to reverse the order, like one from Sue Forrester of Fairfield, Connecticut, who implored him to see, in her words, how important sliced bread is to the morale and saneness of a household. And by early March, the ban was rescinded, a decision greeted with a headline in the New York Times the next day, which read, "Housewives' thumbs safe again." But the truth is, even before the amenities of modern technology or the cult around the Great British Bake Off, since the inception of every known civilization on Earth, bread has been at the center of human society, including Jewish society. Though the Arch of Titus is most known for the prominent display of the engraved menorah, right next to it is the Shulchan, the table which held the showbread, the Lechem HaPanim, of which we read this morning. In fact, for a collection of our commentators, the whole purpose of the menorah itself was simply to serve as the spotlight for the showbread. In the words of the Chizkuni and Rashi's grandson, the Rashbam, God commanded Moshe to make a menorah for a single reason, laha'ir al hashulchan, to illuminate the table. And the visual centrality of this table makes its way into the rabbinic imagination as well, as our sages portray a peculiar practice of the priests each time pilgrims came to visit the temple. Magbian Oto, they say that the priest would lift up the table, Umarin lahem lechem hapanim, and show the pilgrims the showbread. Va'omelem, and say to them, Ra'u chibatchem lifnei Hashem, see how loved you are before the Lord. And this is our question. What is so central about bread? Why is the menorah designed to shine a spotlight on it? Why are the pilgrims treated to an exhibition of it? Why, of all foods on earth, is the only one for which our tradition coined an elongated grace, forcing us to think twice every time we think of eating it? Now, Maimonides himself, the greatest philosopher medieval Judaism produced, writes in his Guide of the Perplexed, "Hatzorach lemizbeach muvuar," the need for the altar is obvious. Aval hashulchan v'halechem lo eda bo siba, but I do not know the reason for the table or the bread. And if the Rambam could not conjure an explanation, what hope have we? But in an effort to mine for as much meaning as we can find, I'd like to share two different views with you today, starting with one of Maimonides' constructive critics, Don Isaac Barbanel. And for him, bread is the universal symbol of material sustenance, what he calls haschar hagufani, corporal benefit. Bread is the food that has served as the staple of society for millennia. It has fiber, which makes us feel full. It is naturally low on fat and high in fuel, and its ingredients are portable and durable and in no need of cooling. When Avram feeds his three guests in the desert, he readies them bread as the remedy to hunger, saying, Ekcha pat lechem, I shall prepare a loaf, v'sa'adu levchem, to sate your souls. And in his commentary on that verse, Rashi observes that this was more than just an Abrahamic proclivity. But Torah, B'Nevi'im, B'Ktuvim, all across the Hebrew Bible, Rashi says, Matzinu, we find depita, that bread, sa'adata deliba, satisfies the spirit. We see it with Abraham in Genesis, in the tale of the concubine, in Judges, and in the Psalms, where King David praises wine as a conduit to joy, oil as a route to beauty, and bread as the key to satisfaction. Yayin yisamach lavav enosh. Wine cheers the hearts of men. Lahatzil panim mishamen. Oil makes the face shine. Velechem, levav enoshis ad, and bread sustains human life. And it is this recognition of bread as a staple that leads King David to use it as a symbol for God's compassion toward the poor, calling him Osem mishpat la'ashukim, he who secures justice for the aggrieved, noten lechem l're'ivim, and gives bread to the needy. Unlike Marie Antoinette's alleged neglect of the poor, God represents an extensive sympathy toward human need, and bread is the ultimate symbol of his material care. So for the Abarbanel, we are bidden as a people to lay bread at the center of our temple, to both thank God for his blessings and to pray for more, to express appreciation for his material attention and implore him to feed and sustain us all. But there is another view, a second view, that sees bread in the context of the temple less as a symbol of divine care than human ingenuity, less as a manifestation of God's power than ours. Though it is true that bread is a staple and has served as a symbol of sustenance, even more important than its alimentary properties is the story of its invention. Because unlike apples or avocados or pears or tomatoes or melons or bananas or dates, bread does not grow on trees or even in the ground. It takes vast amounts of labor to plow and sow and harvest and winnow and sift and mill grain to even begin the process of baking bread. It has often been said that the first person to try cow's milk must have seemed quite strange to their friends, but it is almost impossible to conceive of the people who first made bread. They would have had to demonstrate immense preparation, deep patience, and profound faith as they seeded fields, endured the seasons, and created the tools to turn sheaves of wheat into the staple that we stock and eat with such ease. So impressive is bread's invention that many ancient cultures attribute it to their gods. In Greek myth, it was Demeter, goddess of agriculture, who trained Ptolemy to sow seeds and ground grain, and then delegated him to teach the rest of the human species. But in our faith, bread is not the invention of heaven. It is the consequence of our God given ingenuity and penchant for experimentation. The Torah spends no time at all discussing the origins of bread, other than to say that it will be our invention. When Adam and Eve are expelled from Eden, God declares, "Bezeat apecha tochal lechem, by the sweat of your brow shall you eat bread." So perhaps bread is not simply a symbol of sustenance, but a symbol of the power of human patience and labor, imagination and ingenuity. And seen this way, perhaps setting bread in the center of the temple is less about asking God to sustain us and more to remind us that if we are to thrive as a society that treats every person with dignity, we need to tether our talents to the essence of the temple and the spirit of service. After all, it was, according to archaeologists, the Egyptians who first invented bread. And what did they do with their prowess? They enslaved and exploited the labor of a defenseless foreign nation. Advances in technology do not protect us against our worst impulses. So we need to tether our talents and surrender our powers to the moral vision that binds and inspires us. Bread, the symbol of human ingenuity, enterprise, and industry, is set at the center of the Mishkan, spotlit by the light of the menorah, displayed to the pilgrims on festivals, and followed to this day by an elongated grace to remind us that our material proficiency, our mental acuity, our physical agility all need to be tethered to the presence of heaven if we are to teach humanity the lesson that the world can be redeemed. So today or any day, when we wash our hands before bread and finish our meals with benching, let us all think not only of the immense blessings that heaven has given us, but also of the immense power that God has given us to bless others. And may we all find ways to use our gifts to lift those in need and bring God's vision to life, which is, of course, the best thing since sliced bread. Shavuot Tov.